Hi, Miss McDonald here. I'm here at Morristown National Historical Park in my home state of New Jersey, and we are at the Washington headquarters site of the National Historical Park. Now, you may have seen us before at Jockey Hollow, which is the site of the soldiers' winter encampment of the winter of 1779 to 1780, the hard winter they call it. Actually just found out it was the hardest, toughest, coldest, wintriest, I don't think that's a word, but we're using it, winter in the state of New Jersey history. Interesting fact about that winter, really quick. It was so cold. How cold was it? It was so cold that the British Army, they journaled about crossing the Hudson by foot because it was frozen over, even taking a 3,000-pound cannon across the Hudson River. Now that's cold. So again, we're at the site of Washington's headquarters, and what you see behind me is the site where Washington stayed. It is the old Ford Mansion, F-O-R-D, Ford Mansion. And this was the largest home in the town of Morristown during the year, the late winter, like December of 1779. And that's why it was chosen to be the headquarters. At this time, there was a family living in the home before Washington came, and Mr. Ford, he had passed away, so it was his wife Theodosia and their 4 children. So the wife, Theodosia, she decided to take in General Washington and his company of people, which I will get to in a moment, during that winter. Some really interesting people stayed in this house in addition to George Washington and his wife Martha. Also interesting, Martha joined George. We're on a first name basis. Martha joined George during every winter encampment, and some were easier to get to than others. Ooh, bike. This particular winter, because it was so harsh, was difficult for Martha to get here. Her carriage got stuck in the snow so much that eventually they put her on a sleigh. She like Santa'd it up here, right? So she took the sleigh to get here because it was too wintry otherwise, too much snow. So Martha joined George here. Her kind of role was to boost the spirits of the people in the home because they were confined to the house. There were a lot of people in here. We have George, we have Martha, we have Theodosia, 4 kids. So we're up to 7 people. And then we had their aides de camp, which one of them, Alexander Hamilton, we all know him from the famous musical. He visited as an aide de camp to Washington. That's like the right-hand guy, right? He wrote his correspondence. He kind of like really important secretary in a way. Anyway, there were also workers that were here. So there were 3 types of workers that were here. There were white workers that were being paid. There were white indentured servants, and there were African American slaves that were here. Washington brought slaves. There were already slaves in the home, and he even rented 2 slaves from a neighboring farm, Hannah and Isaac, and he actually like formed a great relationship with them. They really like, George Washington really ended up liking them. He paid them. They ended up buying their freedom, but they stayed with Washington, and then eventually they moved out. And Washington gave them a stipend for the rest of their lives, and Hannah lived until she was 104, so she was receiving that stipend until she passed away. So back to our home over here. They stayed here during the winter, and things were kind of at a lull. Jockey Hollow is 8 miles away. That's kind of far. That's like a 14-15 minute drive according to Google Maps. So it's a while to get there. You cannot see Jockey Hollow from here, but this is like a great illustration of like your difference in rank determined where you stayed, right? So we have the soldiers with 12 men in that 16 by 14 structure, and then down at Jockey Hollow, the officers that more and more rank, less people in the structure. And then you've got George Washington, who's the king of them all, right? The king of the army. That's not a real thing, but he's the top guy in the army. He's staying in this mansion. The Fords were super wealthy. They were the wealthiest family in Morristown. That's why they had a home this big. Homes were not typically this big during this time, and a home like this really showed status and wealth. A few other things that we learned on the tour. It was so fascinating. The home is mostly original. They had to do things to bring it up to safety to modern standards, like different chemicals that could be like lead in the paint. They had to remove that. They had to put a sprinkler system. There's cameras in there. So there's small things, but the structure itself is original. Few interesting things. It was tight quarters at Washington's headquarters. There were people that were sleeping on floors. One part of the home was designated for the people who were working, or the slaves who were there. The 2 rooms were designated for Theodosia, the owner of the home, and her 4 children. So in one room, Theodosia and her daughter slept, and in the other room, the 3 boys slept. So it was pretty cramped in there. And then they had some guests of note. One of them was Lafayette, Marquis de Lafayette of France. He stayed here as well. So if you're a Hamilton fan, this is a great place to come. A lot of history, really great, and really fun. Take the tour, come to Morristown National Historical Park, and really learn a lot about specifically Washington and the winter encampment of 1779 to 1780 here in Morristown. See you later.